As you truly know, one of the new features in version 7 was the Synchronization Framework. And I think it is not wondering us that in the Synchronization Framework we will find many changes, because after the first release it is time for some extensions and the integration of our community response. As we have seen before, the job service is now able to talk with the application server, which leads to the fact that we can now run a synchronization just using the app server. This is something we saw in one of our videos before. Another feature a lot of people will really enjoy is that with version 7.1, first time we are now able to upgrade synchronization projects. Please remember what happens in the past. If there was a new service pack or a new product version, all of the synchronization projects created with one of the older versions was just to delete and to replace by something new, which was able to use the new features implemented in the synchronization editor. This was sometimes really painful, and because of that, they have implemented in 7.1 a new feature that allows from 7.1. That means projects created with the version 7.1 and then upper to become an upgrade once the product version gets upgraded. To do so, there is a change management now implemented that will show a wizard, and this wizard will ask you which project feature or which new synchronization project feature you like to integrate. And then you can select these features and you can upgrade your old synchronization projects. In the next step, I like to talk to you about two other features, and Marcus will guide us to scripted variables and configurable retry intervals for connections and user enhancements in a second step.
Starting with version 7.1, the synchronization editor supports, in addition to the static variables we have used before, dynamic variables that you can define using a script. A script in that case means either VB.NET or C#, depending on the language type you have chosen during the creation of the synchronization project. And as you can see here in the variable editor, in addition to the normal static variables, you do have here the edit button, and this is a dynamic scripted variable. I'm going to click on edit here, and scripted variables can be used for either connecting a username or a password from an external password vault. So for example, one example would be to connect TPAM or Safeguard to fetch the current synchronization password out of the password vault. You can access data from the One Identity Manager connection, and this is demonstrated in that section here. Here I'm going to fetch a value from a configuration parameter out of the One Identity Manager connection. You have to know that this is no normal database connection, so the connector here is just the One Identity Manager connector as have him in the synchronization project. So if you want to have access, in my case here, to the table dialog config parm, you have to omit the table dialog config parm from the string schema during the project creation. So one addition we have done to the synchronization engine is that if you exclude a table from the string schema process, the change is now persistent. In the older version, the table was removed when you activated the project again. Now this exclusion is persistent. And when you're writing your script code here, you do have the two buttons compile and debug, as we have that two buttons in the other areas where the synchronization editor can use scripts, starting with version 7.02. If you want to convert a static variable to a dynamic scripted variable, you click on the variable and then choose the icon here from the toolbar, convert this to a scripted variable, and you're done. And you could enter your code here. The scripted variables will be executed during the connection time, so anytime the system connects for the first time to the target system, the variable will be executed. In the older releases of One Identity Manager, you couldn't configure the retry count and the delay between the retries for each of the systems, and now you are able to configure these settings individually for the target system and the One Identity Manager side for each synchronization project. So click on the target system connection, then on the setup button, and you are able to define your amount of retries and the delay between the retries here. And by default, it is configured to 10 seconds between the retries. The auto mapping wizard helps you creating mappings in a synchronization project when you create the synchronization project from scratch and are not using a template. So when you create a new mapping in your synchronization project, and now I'm choosing the table org on the left hand side, and on the right hand side, this is a database connection to a One Identity Manager instance, so I'm choosing org as well. So now the auto mapping wizard is automatically started, and the wizard has two options. One option is to generate a mapping or autofill a mapping based on a template, and template in that case means on another mapping. So in my case here, when I'm going to demonstrate that, I already have a mapping for the department table. I'm going to use that mapping to create my new mapping for the org table. The other option here is I'm able to use a similarity match for mapping, for creating the map. I'm going to explain that in a second. So now I'm going to choose autofill mapping based on a template. Then the wizard is asking me which template he should use for the mapping, choosing the temp department template. And then he displays every column that he's going to duplicate from the department mapping into the org mapping. This is very useful, for example, when you create a mapping for an LLAP system, for an unknown type, or for Database Connect, when you create your mapping from scratch. And let's assume you already have a mapping created for the IDOT.org person object in the LLAP system, and then you want to duplicate that for a different object class that has, let's say, 80% the same columns, but just 20% are different. So you don't have to create the 80% mappings for the duplicate columns from scratch. You just can use the template wizard here for that. Okay, I'm clicking next, finish. And then the wizard is opening up the newly created mapping, which is called org here. And all the yellow columns you can see here are the ones he has auto-created. Of course, primary object matching rule for UID department is wrong in that case. This here is just because the UID department column is in the org table as well, so I'm going to remove that. And to get a valid mapping, the only thing I have to do in that case here would be selecting my UID org, moving that to the left hand side, make that the matching rule, and I am done. So that's the auto mapping wizard when I'm using a template, and I can use the same mapping here when I'm using the similarity match, just to illustrate the difference here. So now I'm going to use the similarity match, and the similarity match uses the similarity function when strings are going to be compared. This is a built-in .NET function, and what I'm able to do is here I can tune the results. So when I'm going to even low similarity, or columns or mappings that would have low similarity would be proposed as an mapping, and then the opposite, when I'm moving the slider to the right hand side, only columns that have a high match would end up in the mapping. So I'm going to click on next. So now I'm able to change what the wizard proposes here, what the algorithm proposes. Let's say custom date time here. I want to change to custom date time to X date inserted, and I leave the other ones as they are. I'm clicking on finish. I can see that the mapping in my case here is also very complete because all the column types and column names are very similar, of course. In my use case here, so you can see here, this is what I've changed manually in the wizard, and same as before, the only thing for me to do is here has match UID org to UID org. Say here, this is the matching rule, and I'm done. So this dramatically improves the creation of fresh mappings for any custom target system integration. In 7.1, we changed the behavior, how the synchronization editor works with encrypted passwords. In the past, when you open up a synchronization project and your database was encrypted, you see an option to re-enter all the passwords because the synchronization editor is unable to decrypt the encrypted password. But this leads to problems when you have more than one variable set in your synchronization project, or when you open up the synchronization project and you wanted to take a look in one of the target systems in your synchronization project using the target system browser, you would have to enter all the passwords, because in the 7.0 releases, when you enter a password and then you click on save, the value would be overwritten, and when you not entered a correct password, your synchronization project would be not working anymore. So with 7.1 we changed that behavior. You do see here in the decryption dialog, you have the option to ignore passwords and could ignore them individually. So for my variable set prod here, I'm saying, hey, I ignore this value, so I don't want to put in that specific password here. And I can see here that some passwords are pre-filled, and this comes from the new option that the synchronization editor is able to re-encrypt the passwords and store it locally, so that the synchronization editor is able to decrypt that. And whenever you open up the synchronization project again, you wouldn't have to re-enter the password even when the database is encrypted. And when you want to delete the locally stored password, you have the option here in the settings menu of the synchronization editor. So see here that I do have a saved password for the variable set vi here. I'm going to delete that and click on OK. And when I reopen the same synchronization project, you can see here that the password is not pre-filled anymore. I do have the option to ignore that. In addition to that, you have also the ability to choose your variable set you want to use in target system browser or in the object matching. So for example, here in my synchronization project, I have 3 variable sets. One is IAM local, prod, and VI. And let's say I want to use IAM local, and now the target system browser here is using that specific variable set IAM local. When I'm clicking on browse and getting the domain setting here, I can see this is my domain IAM.local. And the same is true when I'm going into a matching wizard. So here in the mapping editor, you do have the matching wizard here that tests your matching rules. When I'm clicking here, you can see that he's using now the variable set IAM local to execute the matching test.
Some more usability enhancements. First of all, there is the capability to be able to revert variable sets. That means if you change a variable set and seconds after you figure out, oh, that was the wrong one, then there is now an undo button, and this undo button allows you to step back to the old configuration. In addition to that, exists in the meantime the capability in the mapping editor for both sides, that means the database side and the target system side, to see in the info field on the right lower or left lower, in addition to the data type as well the data length. That is sometimes very helpful to figure out why you get problems by converting values from one system to the other. A very last enhancement feature is that in the meantime, the synchronization editor shows a warning message if in a synchronization project the schema is compressed, so that you can be aware of that something is missing and you have to reload the schema if you want to change something.